How you doing? I'm Kevin O'Hara for alcoholmastery.com. Today's topic is, I just want to go back to my recent visit back to Ireland with my son and my granddaughter, and just talk about some of the things that I've sort of learnt since I've come back. I've done a lot of thinking about why I reacted in the way I did. I felt such an overwhelming despondency almost at certain times. So it was almost as if I was in two different worlds. At one stage I was with my son and my granddaughter, and I just felt, an overwhelming sense of joy, and it was just I had some lovely moments, and that was the general feeling. I generally felt like I was good, but at other times when I sort of visited old places that I used to go, old places where I worked, and so on, I felt really that I felt almost depressed. It was something that it wasn't nice. So anyway, I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of weeks since I've got back, and one of the things that I learned is that change happens. Either people can change in your life, situations can change, places can change, or you can change. And a lot of the things about my change, my personal change, it sort of going back to Ireland just highlighted how much I'd actually changed. And I've done this before. I've gone back, when I was younger. One of my best mates growing up, I hadn't seen this guy for 10 years, 12 years and stuff, and just after my son was born, we went on a visit back to Dublin. We'd been living in Halifax in West Yorkshire in the UK for a while, and we went back to visit this guy, and in all that time he was exactly the same person as when I'd left. He was just, and it was so, that sort of was, it made me feel despondent at the time, because the last time I'd spoken to him we were teenagers, and then this was sort of in my late 20s, early 30s, I think. Would have been late 20s. And I hadn't changed at all. He was still sort of had this childish streak in him. But going back to Ireland, I noticed how many things were the same, especially the people. The streets were obviously going to be the same. That wasn't much of a change. But overall, it was the people who were the same. My drinking buddies, they were drinking the same amounts, or if not more than they were before. They were a little bit older, but they were still talking along the same lines. Oh yeah, we sort of come out on this day and that day, and we spend this amount of time out, and we're doing this and we're doing that, and same shit they were doing 5 years ago. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, if that's your cup of tea. But me now, as I just couldn't relate to it anymore, whereas before I could relate to that. So, these people who I used to call my friends I had nothing more in common with them, And I've said this a few times, that, if your relationships are based around alcohol, or if alcohol plays a large part in your relationships with other people, then unfortunately some of those relationships are going to disappear, because it's not compatible anymore. You being a drinker, or you not being a drinker, and them still drinking, and if that relationship revolves around that one thing, once that one thing is gone, it's very difficult to hold the relationship, the friendship alive. So it was just, I was surprised at how much I changed. And that was a good thing in a way, because it just highlighted for me how much progress I've made in the last 4 years. It's 5 years since I left Ireland, but it's 4 years since I stopped drinking. And that brings me on to the second point, which was that you know, it highlighted how hard it is to kill some habits, right? You know, when I went back there and we were driving up from Dublin down to Limerick, I was grand, you know, and sort of looking forward to seeing my son, and we met up with my son and went out and had a meal and went back to his house, and you know, it was really nice. Then the next day we went downtown, and like I said, I went down to some of the old forestry hunts that I used to work in. I was fully intending on doing you know, at least half a dozen videos and stuff. I ended up doing 3, but it was surprising how quickly my brain slotted straight back into my old thinking, right? Not my old drinking thinking, you know, there was no way that was going to happen, but into sort of as if I'd never been away from the place. You know, it was all so much like how easy it would have been to just slot straight back into that old lifestyle if I was still drinking, right? You know, so you know, it goes to show a lot about moderation as well, that when you moderate, you try to moderate, you've got this in the forefront of your mind, you're using a lot of your willpower to moderate, you're spending a lot of your resources on trying to keep away from the beer or the wine or whatever it is that you're drinking. And once you let down that guard again, your natural tendency of your mind is to slip straight back into the old routine. And the old routine is the one that you've been doing so often. Now, we're talking in another video this week about sort of how simple it is and how easy it is to get ritualized and to lose connection with the original motivations for your drinking, or any motivations for your drinking, and it becomes just a habit and a ritual and something that you do because you do it, you know. But that's how I felt, that if I was still drinking, or if I'd come here and I changed my drinking habits and stuff, going back there, I could have easily seen how quickly I could have gone back into my old routines of drinking so much Guinness and not really caring about anything else, you know. And that was worrying, but it was, you know, for me it highlighted a lot of what I've been talking about, and it sort of confirmed a lot of what I've been learning about habits, that the habit doesn't actually disappear, the behavior doesn't disappear, and you know, it's more than just the alcohol, right? It's more than just one isolated thing. It's a lot of things that come together that form the bedrock of the behavior itself, you know, that form this kind of you know, the step-by-step ritualistic processes that we all go through that make up the behavior, and that behaviors then form the habit. As I said earlier on, one of the sort of most despondent things about it was how much my old drinking buddies hadn't sort of changed themselves, you know, that they were still the same. It was almost as if they were stuck on this endless loop, like a broken record, right? Repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And when I say there's no chance of them getting out of it, I don't know whether they wanted to. You know, as I said before about myself, that there was many times in my own drinking journey where I didn't realize I had to change, that I didn't realize that there was anything wrong with what I was doing, you know, that there was anything wrong with my drinking. You know, I always saw cigarette smoking, or at least, you know, once I got into it for a couple of years and I knew I was hooked on it and I tried to give up, that it was something that I never wanted in my life and that I really wanted to stop smoking. But, you know, I never saw that with alcohol, so maybe my friends never, you know, didn't see the sort of an alternative to what they were doing. And I think that was another sort of thing that I saw back there, was that, you know, that old routine and the behaviours and part of me slipping back into that old habit, or my brain wanting to slip back into not the old habit, but the old sort of way of looking at things, right? Part of me realized that this was a place that that made me want to drink in the first place. You know, that it was its environment, its people, it's what you're used to, it's what your, as I say, your rituals and your actions and your behaviors. This all plays a massive part in any drinking habit, right? You know, and if there's nothing else on offer, or if you perceive that there's nothing else on offer, then you're going to do the thing that you've always done, or the thing that is done by a lot of people around you, right? The things that are that people are used to doing, the thing that you're used to doing, you know. You're going to revert to that all the time, because comfort zone is a lot easier to do than you know, trying to change things or trying to do things differently. And you know, in order to change some things in life, you know, the environment, going back to Ireland wasn't the only thing that made me drink, but in order to change things in life, you've got to you've got to look at things first of all from a wider perspective, and look at how many different influences there are on your life, on your habit, on your behavior. And you've got to sort of try and isolate the things that are influencing those things, that behavior, that habit, and you've got to change those bit by bit and gradually. You've got to build a new life. So part 2 of the first one. How do you know what to change? You know, it's difficult to tell. You know, at first it's difficult to tell. You have to sort of go through the whole process, right? You have to push yourself into day 1, day 2, day 3, week 1, week 2, week 3, so on and so forth. And gradually these things will pop up, you know. The things that you need to change will make themselves known to you, because you'll see the difficulty in pushing through certain areas of your life, you know. You'll see the difficulty of being with certain people, being in certain environments. You'll see different thoughts popping up into your head that you've got to deal with. And all of these things take time. You know, at the beginning you don't know what to deal with, because you're so used to doing things with alcohol. You're so used to the habit that it's difficult to sort of see outside that habit, you know. You know, it's almost as if, let's say, if you were brought up in one country and you'd never been outside the country, you'd never seen outside the country, it's difficult for you to imagine what it is like to be in another country. I mean, even if you've seen pictures of this other country, if you've seen pictures of the outside world, outside your own country, it's difficult to imagine what it's like to actually be there, you know. And you can have romantic notions about what it's like. You can have sort of have certain fear about what it's like or what it might be like in certain situations, but until you actually go there and experience it firsthand, you're not going to have that knowledge, you know. Even if other people tell you it's from their experience, it's not from yours. So, and it's the same thing here. You know, a lot of people can sort of tell you, well, this is what it's like to stop drinking, and this is what you'll go through in day 1 and day 2, physically or mentally. This is what you're going to have to change in your environment. This is what you're going to have to do here and there, and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't, none of this counts for your experience. None of this can substitute for your own experience. So it's only by going through it and putting up with your own discomfort and, you know, working through these issues one by one as they come up, that you're going to not only distance yourself from the alcohol and the alcohol habit, but also put yourself into a position where you're encouraging growth in your own life and forward momentum. And once you get that forward momentum, then you start to build something which is worthwhile, you know. And you know, I could talk for hours on that subject alone, but just finally, one big lesson that I've learned is, that none of it really matters, whether a habit comes back, or, whether you think that a habit's coming back, or you're slotting back into an old way of thinking, or whatever it is, because once you can use your own brain, the tools that you've got, right? Once you use certain techniques, and like I say, when I was back in Ireland, there was no chance that I was going to drink. It was the first time in a long while that I've been sort of confronted, for the want of a better word, with my old friend, the pint of Guinness, and it was sat on the table beside me, and I didn't feel anything. It was just like, yeah, it's just another black liquid in a glass, and it was nothing there. There was no way I was going to do it. So it was because of all the things that I've learned, and because of how much I've moved forward in the 4 years. And if you spend the 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or whatever it is, thinking about how much you miss alcohol, right? Or thinking about how much you're still an alcoholic, or you're still one drink away from being that person again, right? Then I don't know what's going to happen then, I'm not that person. I don't think that way. I believe that, alcohol for me was just a means to an end. It was a way of life that I don't do anymore. I've escaped from that, and I've left it behind me, and I've built something new, something much more worthwhile. And for most of the people that I know that are successful in doing this, and I'm not talking about just staying off the alcohol, but getting away from the alcohol thinking, and getting away from even, believing themselves to believing that alcohol can be a part of their lives anymore, Those people who are successful in that are the ones who deliberately build something better for themselves. They have a big reason why they want to stop in the first place, and they've got such determination to succeed and to forge themselves that new life that there is no way they're going to go back, And I'm not talking about somebody who has never had a thought about drinking. I still do have the odd thought about drinking a glass of wine. Wouldn't it be nice to have a glass of wine now? And it's like I said, momentary thoughts that, can cause a physical reaction sometimes. It can cause your mouth to water, or it can cause you to think about it in a certain way. But at the end of the day, you're going to get thoughts, and it doesn't matter what thoughts you get, but it's what you do, what you act out on, whether you act out on these thoughts that really matters. So look, I'm going to stop it there. If you have any questions at all about this video or any of the other videos, any suggestions about videos that you'd like to see, leave a comment down below. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video. And go on over to the website. There's a lot of stuff there that can help you with building more stuff all the time, trying to add as much value. Most of it's free, so you don't have to pay for most of it. There's some paid courses over there, and there's some one-on-one coaching that obviously I've got to charge for in order to keep the show running. But apart from that, there's 600 videos that are free. There's a free forum, there's free newsletter, most of the stuff, as I say, absolutely no charge. So go on over there, and until next time, I'm Kevin O'Hara for alcoholmastery.com. Take care of yourself, have a good day, onwards and upwards.